Hello and welcome back to crocheting the easiest crochet sweater that I could possibly think to find to show you. So this is part 2. So for this video you're going to need to know how to do a single crochet, a double crochet into a chain. In this video we're going to go through how you're going to make your sweater panels and then how you're going to assemble those, sew them together and add in a little bit of ribbing. If you're seeing this video first and you've never crocheted before, then I really strongly recommend you go back and check my previous video which just runs you through those basic stitches. Also just to note that this is made to size, so I'm going to give you some guidance on how you can make this fit you perfectly. So let's get going. For this sweater I'm using an Aran weight yarn. You can use either DK or Aran, but it's just something to bear in mind is that Aran will work up a little bit quicker and will end up a little bit bigger due to the size of the yarn and its thickness. I'm also using a 5mm crochet hook, which is what the ball of yarn calls for. So to get started, we're just going to do a slip knot, and then we're going to begin to chain up the length for your sweater. My last video goes through a more in-depth tutorial for how to do a slip knot and how to chain, but you're just going to be pulling the yarn through the loops on your hook to create a series of loops, which is called chaining. You're going to want to chain up to the length of your sweater. So when you're chaining, hold the length of the chain up against your body to see the size of it. The length of your chain will be the width of your sweater. So for mine I did a chain of 70, but this will all take into account the thickness of your yarn, the thickness of your hook and your tension, as well as the size of sweater that you want to make. If you're following me exactly, the Aran weight yarn with the 5mm crochet hook across 60 stitches will make a medium. So this is my chain of 70 chains. And remember that when you are doing double crochet, you need to add an additional 2 chains because you'll be going into the 3rd chain from the hook. So here I'm just adding those additional 2 chains, and I've got my thumb on that chain that we're going to go into. So you count down three chains. So now we're just going to place a double crochet into each chain. So you're yarning over, pushing your crochet hook into the top of that chain loop, pulling the yarn back through, pulling the yarn back through 2, and pulling the yarn back through 2. So that's your double crochet, and you're going to do that along into each stitch. So again, you put the yarn around the hook, you push it into the top of your chain, you pull the yarn back through, pull through 2, and pull through 2. And I think I mentioned in my previous video, but this is the trickiest part when you're starting out crocheting, figuring out where those chains are, especially if your tension's a little bit tight. But once you've got this step, this is really the hardest part and it just gets easier from here. So I'll do one more with you and then I'll meet you back at the end. So you're going to wrap the yarn around the hook, push it into the top of that chain, pull the yarn back through, yarn through 2, yarn through 2, like so. So just do that all the way through the chain and I'll meet you back at the end. So here we're just reaching the end of the chain, so I'm just putting those last stitches in and then we are going to turn our work around, because you always work from right to left when you're crocheting. It's also a good idea at this point to hold this length up to your body and just make sure that you're happy with the size of it. Again, this will be the width of the body of your sweater, so you just want to make sure you're happy with that. So to move on to the next round, you're going to chain 3, and this chain 3 counts as your first double crochet on row 2. So turn your work around, and then we're going to continue to work double crochet. And as I mentioned in my previous video, you're not going into the same stitch that double crochet chain 3 came from. You're going to go into the 2nd double crochet from the row before. So as you can see here, I will yarn over, and instead of going into the 1st double crochet from before, I'm going into the 2nd. And this just keeps your edges really nice and straight. But again, you're going into the top of the double crochet from row 1. So you'll have the 2 lines of yarn running over the top of your hook. And then you'll continue a double crochet as before. So you're going yarn over into the top of the double crochet from the row before, pull through 2, pull through 2. And you're just going to continue to do this along the row, and you might find that this starts to get a bit easier now because you're going into double crochets from the row before instead of into the chain. But also just keep a close eye and make sure you're not missing any stitches as you go. Once we get to the end, it's definitely a good idea to make sure you're counting your stitches, especially when you first start out, to make sure you've got the same number of stitches each row. So I've got 70, I'll need to make sure I've counted these by the end of this row to make sure that this 2nd row also has 70 stitches. So now meeting you back at the end, we need to make sure that this does definitely hit 70 stitches. So whilst right now it kind of looks like I've hit 70, I'm actually on 69. And this is just because there is a hidden stitch from that chain at the start of the row 1. So you just want to make sure you push your hook into the top of that chain 2 and do a double crochet, and that can be quite tricky because sometimes those chains are a little bit tight. And then count along, and if you've got 70 stitches, you're ready to move on to row 3. So you're going to chain 3 as before, and to count as your first double crochet. You're going to turn your work and do exactly the same as we did before. So you're going into each stitch, so again not that first one, the second stitch, and you're placing double crochet into each row. And this is basically it for the entirety of the sweater. You're just going to continue these rows along until you're happy with the length, and then you're going to do that again for the other side of the body. Definitely make sure to keep counting your stitches to make sure you've got the same number as previous rows, but again, don't forget that last stitch at the end. I'm just going to show you that last stitch at the end again, just so you can really see it. So as you can see, we're coming up to the end, and you reach the last double crochet from the row before, but you've still got that chain 3. So just make sure you're putting your double crochet into that chain 3 there. And I think I'd chained mine pretty tight the previous row, so it's a little bit stiff to get it in. But you really just want to make sure that's the stitch you're doing your last double crochet in. And this just keeps your edges really nice and straight. So now you've got 3 rows of double crochet, and we're just going to continue doing the exact same thing. So chaining 3 and then placing 69 double crochet along the row, or however many number your crochet sweater pattern is going to be. So I will continue doing this, and I'll meet you when I'm a little bit further on. So here I think I have about 15 rows of double crochet. I then did an additional 20 on top of that to end up with 35 rows, but just continue to hold it up to yourself as you're crocheting so you know what size to make. You can make these cropped or you can make these long, it's completely up to you. So I am just continuing to chain 3, turn my work, and work all the way along my project. An additional tip for you here, this might not be a problem you come across, but it was a problem I came across today. So I ran out of one of the balls of yarn that I was using, so I needed to attach the same colour onto my project. So I'm going to show you really quickly how to do an invisible knot. So take your second ball of yarn and find the end of it, and line up the end of your previous ball with your new ball like so. And then you're just going to tie a knot on the first side. So take the loops and tie a knot like so. And then you're just going to do the same on the other side. So tie a knot on the other side as well, just a simple knot. You can then pull these together so they come together like so. And then you just snip those shorter ends off. And you can cut them really close to that knot as well, and this won't come undone. If you've started with like a 200-gram ball of yarn, you probably won't come across this issue, but if you're using smaller balls, this could come up. So it's just a little handy trick. And then you can put your yarn back in and just continue crocheting as usual. So here I'm just coming to the very end of my first panel. I'm just doing those last stitches. I'm then going to fasten this off by cutting a tail and then pulling it through like you would do a chain, but you just pull it all the way through like that and then pull it tight. And that is your first panel. And you're just going to want to do the same thing again and end up with 2 panels. Now we're going to look at the sleeves. So you're starting this off the same as before with a slip knot and with some chains. And so for this I did 60 chains. And this is the width of your arm, so you can hold it up against yourself but also against your previous panels as well. This is essentially the whole way round your arm this goes. So I did 60. And then you're really just going to repeat what we did before. So into each of these you're going to be placing a double crochet. But before we do that, remember that whilst you've got your 60, you need to do an additional 2 chains just to make sure you end up with the right number. So here I'm just holding on to the 59th stitch with my thumb. I'm going to do 2 additional chains, then I'm going to do my first double crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook, and by doing so that creates a fake first double crochet in itself. So here I'm just showing you that 3rd stitch from the hook, and I'm pushing my hook in, I'm pulling the yarn back through, yarn through 2, and yarn through 2. And then it is really just the same as before. You're just going into each chain, placing a double crochet, and we're just going to be repeating what we did for all of the panels until you end up with 4 panels. So just remember that the double crochet is to yarn over, push your hook into the chain, pull through 2 and pull through 2. So here I'm at the end of row 2 And again, remember that you need to put that last double crochet into the top of the chain from the previous round. So make sure you're just counting and make sure that, so for this it's 60 stitches per row. Just have a count through, make sure it still says 60, and then you can carry on with your next row. So I'll meet you back when I'm a little bit further up. So here I'm about 15 rows up. I probably want to do another 20 again just to get it to the right length, and you can hold this up against your arm to see the length of it. So I'm just carrying on, placing double crochet into each double crochet from the previous row along and regularly counting my stitches to make sure it equals 60. At this point, this is my sleeve finished, so it ended up being 35 double crochet rows across 60 stitches, and you're just going to want to make 2 of those, one for each sleeve, and they will go alongside your front and back panel, so all in all you'll end up with 4 panels. So here you can see that's my front, and then that's my back, and then my 2 sleeves are coming, 1 and 2. Now we can have a look at the assembly. So you're going to want to lay your panels like this on the floor, and we're going to be sewing along these specific lines first. Make sure to leave enough space for your head as well in the middle. You're just going to need a tapestry needle for this. You're also going to want to try and make it as even as possible. So the way that I do this is I count the double crochet on the opposite end of each side. So here I'm counting up and I can tell that there are 14 rows of double crochet before I reach my sleeve, and I'll do the same on the other side. And now you're going to thread your yarn through your tapestry needle and then insert it through your project. And we're working into each double crochet stitch along the sleeve. So do a double knot to hold your yarn in place, and then you're just going to go into each stitch. So I'm just showing you here. I'm just pushing the needle through the top of the double crochet from the arm sleeve, and I'm just going to go all the way along this sleeve. So when you reach the end and you want to tie it off, I'm just doing my last sewing stitch here, and then I'm going to go back through the same stitch, but I'm not going to pull it all the way through. I'm going to pull it part of the way, and then I'm just going through that little loop that we created there just so it holds itself in place. And you're going to do that on the other side as well. And then when you're looking at the neck, you just want to make sure you're leaving yourself enough space for your head to fit through. So just count your stitches on either side to make sure that it fits correctly. And at this point, we're going to turn our project around, so flip it over entirely. And then you're going to just fold it in half like this. So you're just pulling the top down across. And now you can really see the sweater start to take shape. So just leveling it out, making sure it's all neat. And I'm going to show you where you're going to be sewing next. So now you want to be sewing along these lines, and this is the last step of sewing. So just as before, sewing carefully through each stitch and just really pulling it together tight. So here I'm just doing the same as before, just going into the side of the sweater panels, making sure they're together. And now I'm just going to weave in some ends. So the way that you do this is you just put the ends of the yarn through your tapestry needle, and then you just weave it into your project, and this just hides your ends nicely and you can snip them short. So here I'm just doing it again. I've just taken the end and put it through my tapestry needle, and then I'm just weaving it through into my project, and then I'll cut it short. Because I was feeling lazy this day, I didn't do all of them. I just did all of the ends that were showing, so you can see that there's still a couple of ends here, but you won't see them because we're going to turn the sweater back the right way around. And this is just so the stitches from when you sewed don't show quite as much. And really, you could end here if you wanted to. This is a fully functioning sweater. You could put this on, make sure it fits, but I'm going to show you how to do some really simple ribbing. So I'm just going to take the colour that I used for the sleeves, and I'm going to go into the top or in between the double crochet. Now you can go in top if you prefer, but I quite like how it looks when you go in between, and it just makes it a lot easier to do this the whole way around. So you're going to want to start with a slip knot, put your hook through the hole and pull it tight, and then you just want to insert your hook in between the double crochet. So there's 2 double crochet stitches there, and I'm going into them, so I'm not going into the top of the stitch, I'm going in between. And then you're just going to pull through a loop, and then you're going to just finish that off by pulling it through, so a single crochet. And I'm just going to do that the whole way around, just placing a single crochet into the top or in between each double crochet from the row before. So now I'm just coming up to the end. You can see I've got a couple more single crochet to do, and then I'm just going to reattach. So the way I do this is I push my hook through that single crochet that we did to attach the yarn onto the project, pull through and pull through, like so. and then you can snip the yarn and fasten it off. So now I'm just doing the same on the sleeves, so I'm going to do a slip knot, put my hook in, and then I'm going to push my hook in between each double crochet from the previous row. So I'm pushing my hook in, I'm pulling the yarn through, and then I'm pulling the yarn through too to create a single crochet. I'm just going to do that the whole way around for the sleeves. And I'll do this around all of the sleeves, the neckline, and the base of the sweater. And so here I am at the end again. So I'm just placing my last single crochet into these stitches, and then I'm going to reattach by going into the top of that single crochet stitch that we started off with, pulling through and pulling through. And that's really it. You've ended up with a crochet sweater, and it's so customizable, you can make it in so many different ways. But at this point, try it on, see if you're happy with how it fits, and you're now all set to start doing more advanced projects. If you made it this far, a huge thank you. It really means a lot that you stuck around, and I really hope that this video was useful for you. As I said in my previous video, I really want to improve and get better at my tutorials, so if you've got any feedback or comments, please leave them below, and it would be really helpful for me to see just so I can improve moving forward. Also, if you ended up with a crochet sweater by the end of this video, a huge congratulations, that is amazing, and I would absolutely love to see anything that you've made, so please feel free to share with me. Do reach out. I'm on most social media platforms under Crochet by Lib. Thank you once again, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will catch you soon.